What's going down, guys? Welcome back to the channel. So today, we've actually got a CPU cooler that we're going to be taking a look at. This is a cooler from a company by the name of Reeven. If you guys remember a while back, probably about a year or so ago, I did a review on a couple of their other coolers that they have available, and they just recently sent me one of their dual tower coolers that I want to take a look at. Now, these guys are owned by the same parent company that actually makes the Scythe coolers. If you guys remember, I'm actually running one of those in my main system that I showed you guys about a month or so ago. But yeah, we're going to take a look at this thing. Just take it out of the box real quick here and see what it's looking like, actually. And we're also going to go ahead and install this thing and run some tests and see what it's talking about. And it actually works with Intel and AMD platforms, although this doesn't actually have an AM4 compatible bracket in it out of the box, but I believe you can get one separately from Reeven directly. So this comes with two fans, like I mentioned earlier. This is a 140mm one here. It's got yellow as kind of the main color. It's a sleeve bearing fan. It's got a braided cable here. And then there's also a 120mm fan here. You can see it's pretty much set up the same way, just a little bit more square, but yellow main color, black accent, sleeve bearing as well. And it's also got a 4-pin braided cable on it. Kind of looks like two small, like Hyper 212 Evos stacked up against each other or something like that. We've got, looks like 6 heat pipes there on the bottom. Yeah, 6 heat pipes total. It's got a chrome plated or a nickel plated base there. And then we got our hardware here. As I mentioned, this did not come with an AM4 bracket out of the box, but I did contact Reeven and they said you can actually reach out to them for an AM4 bracket if you were using a AMD system or Ryzen system. Bam! And then we got the instructions here that will teach you how the hell to install this thing. Just looking at the brackets and stuff, doesn't look like it's going to be too bad. I've actually used mounting hardware like this before, so it should be relatively easy to install. Alright, and the cooler is finally in. So the install process was pretty normal, about what I would expect. You do have to install a new backplate when installing this on the Intel platform, so that obviously took a little bit of extra time, but the install process actually wasn't any different than any modern Noctua or even previous Reeven coolers that I've installed, so that was pretty straightforward. Clearance is another issue there. I pretty much have no clearance in this case. It supports coolers up to 163mm, and that's exactly what this cooler is. So it's pretty much up against the tempered glass side panel, but that shouldn't affect the cooling in this case since the air is being exhausted out the back. You do have a 120mm fan up front and a 140 in the middle there. The 120 obviously is for fan or for RAM clearance, which shows about a finger gap between the RAM that I'm using and the top fan there. So you do get a little bit of wiggle room depending on your RAM choice. So originally I was going to use a Hyper 212 Evo as a baseline for these tests, but I ran into some issues with extremely high temperatures, and I thought it was maybe some type of like power draw issue with the motherboard and this CPU. But when I removed the cooler, I noticed that the thermal paste wasn't actually spread as evenly as it should have been. I guess maybe the cooler must have moved when I was installing it the first time around. So I think that was actually the reason for the unexpected high temp. So for that reason, I'm just gonna throw out those results, and we'll just show you guys basically what the Okeanos did on its own, and hopefully that should give you some perspective on how this thing performs. So I ran the Intel XTU test, stress test for 15 minutes just to let things heat up, and we had an average CPU temp of 68 degrees Celsius. That's with a 27 degree ambient temp. So it actually performed pretty well considering we have the CPU overclocked to 4.5 gigahertz at 1.25 volts. We actually have a little bit of wiggle room to go higher. I've had this CPU up to 4.6 at one point, but it required like 1.29 volts, so I thought that wasn't really worth it. But it looks like we actually have some wiggle room to go to that route if we wanted to. Obviously with the 4790K, it doesn't thermally throttle until 100 degrees Celsius. Not that we'd want to overclock it up to that point, but just throwing out there that we do have some wiggle room, so the CPU cooler does seem to perform pretty well. So, in conclusion, there's a couple things I'd like to see from Reeven. Number one is you've got to include AM4 brackets with this CPU cooler. Ryzen's on its 2nd generation now, so there's really no reason why you'd have to order an upgrade kit at this point. It should come with the cooler by default. Also, this cooler comes in at $75, which puts it in line with the more premium CPU coolers that are out there. So I'd like to see a little bit more premium fans, these sleeve bearing fans. I think maybe they could give us something a little bit nicer. They do get a little bit loud under load, although Reeven does include low noise adapters to help counter that, but I would just like to see something, you know, maybe a little bit nicer for the price. Aside from that, I actually like the Okeanos. It cools very well, which obviously is the most important thing. Not a lot of people run Reeven CPU coolers, and this is the 3rd one I've used. They've actually all been pretty solid. So this may be something that you'd want to consider if you know you're shopping for a CPU cooler for your system. I'll actually put a link to this one specifically down in the comments below if you guys want to check it out. But yeah, I think you guys should give Reeven a shot, man. I know they're a more smaller company, but their stuff is pretty good, I think. Just a couple adjustments here and there, and I think they'll have a really solid lineup. But yeah, let me know what you guys think about this down in the comments below. Like this video if you guys like this type of content. I'll see you guys in the next video. I'm out of here. See ya!